Welcome to the Tyler Turner Show on the Sportscast. On today's date, October 13th, 2020. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all your channels, YouTube, Periscope, iTunes. And if you are on iTunes, please leave us a rating and a review. It will help us out tremendously. Visit us on thesportscast.net. Also follow us on Twitter, Sportscast1, and check out our app, the Sportscast, in the iOS App Store. Well, folks, tonight I am doing my own, well, it's my show anyways, but I am literally alone. I do not have any guests. Last week I was not available. I was out of town. So I'm back after a 2-week hiatus, which is fine because I cover mostly the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and obviously they have neither conference has started yet. Big Ten is starting here in 12 days. Pac-12 is starting in a little under a month. And I'm excited. I'm excited because when it initially was a broach to me, I'm an Oregon Duck fan, but I live in Big Ten country, and these are the two I've always, since childhood, been a Big Ten fan, and then I lived out West Coast and became a Pac-12 and specifically an Oregon Duck fan. But obviously 2 months ago, about around now actually, it's about like August 10th, I believe, they postponed both seasons. And I was a little concerned that we weren't going to have anything this year, and it was going to kind of be one of those years that I was going to have an SEC team or a ACC team or maybe even a Big 12 team. But as the stars aligned and some things started to get together in the Big Ten country, it was mostly people protesting and fighting and Ohio State, Nebraska, and Nebraska kind of saying, hey, we want to play. And then eventually the Pac-12, got the testing by Quidel, and the Big Ten, of course, announced their plans to resume play. And then Pac-12 was scrambling because they're like, I don't want to be the only Power 5 conference. Within a week, they had announced plans to play. So I'm excited. Mostly the first couple of shows I've done, first one I think I kind of went a little bit over the college football landscape. Then I kind of talked on the Pac-12 more than the Big Ten. And then the last one with Hifliday, specifically talked about the rosters in the Pac-12. Well, today I'm going to start off a little more talking about the Big Ten because I haven't touched on that as much. I haven't gone over exactly what the schedule is going to look like, what I think the rosters look like, who I think is good, who I think is not good, and who I think can win it, and who I think can be a contender, and maybe an underrated team and maybe an overrated team. So I'll just kind of touch on a couple of those. Specifically, when I think of the Big Ten, I think everyone, at least right now, is thinking the big team in the Big Ten is Ohio State. And that's fair to say. Ohio State has won. And I'm going completely off memory here. I believe they've won the last 3 or 4. I think it's the last 3 Big Ten titles. I know 4 years ago, Penn State won, but then Ohio State actually made the playoff despite not winning the Big Ten. And I think other than that 1 year that Penn State won, I think Ohio State has been the champion off the top of my head. No, Michigan State won it. Then Ohio State, of course, they won it, and they won the national title. But Ohio State over the last – it seems like the last 15 years, Ohio State has kind of dominated the Big Ten. Don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but they probably in the last 15 years have won roughly 7, 8, 9 of the Big Ten titles. I mean, I know Wisconsin's been up there, maybe won 1 or 2. Michigan State won 1, Penn State won 1. But it's been the Ohio State show. And this year's not going to be any different. When you just go from, in my opinion, now I got some outliers. I got some stuff to work through. But I mean, when you just look from a baseline perspective, so my team talent formula, which I put on the sportscast.net, which is basically the baseline talent of each roster, where their like recruiting rankings were, who they signed. And Ohio State has been in the top 5 pretty much every year over the last, since the 247 has a 247 team talent composite. Ohio State's been in the top 5 every single season. They have been as high as 1 a couple seasons ago. This year, in my formula, their third 247 team talent composite actually just came out. I think it was like 3 days ago. And once again, Ohio State was third. They were the only Big Ten team in the team talent composite inside the top 10. In my formula, I have Penn State at number 10. Team talent had Penn State at number 13. And I would say borderline top 10. That's kind of where Penn State was last year. And when I actually am going to kind of unravel and wrap this, the team that I do consider the most serious threat to Ohio State, it is Penn State, for several reasons, not just the fact that they play the second game of the season, they play in Penn State, and I know home field advantage is not what it normally is, but still, it's your stadium, you're playing, you don't have to travel. There's still a slight advantage. I don't know how much crowd pumping they're going to do, but there's still a slight advantage. And the fact that, Penn State, returns a lot, especially on the defensive side. They don't bring back Micah Parsons, but they bring back a lot in the defensive line. They have some very talented linebackers that are there, even though Parsons is left. And they have a pretty talented secondary, and they have an experienced quarterback. They have two of the best running backs in the Big Ten, and then they have probably the best tight end. So they have some pieces that if someone's going to knock off Ohio State, and it's the second game of the year, and as you've seen, some teams at the beginning have looked a little bit sloppy. So if Ohio State comes out there and, maybe a little bit sloppy on offense, I look at Ohio State's roster, and offensively, it's going to be tough to match up. They have the best quarterback, I believe, in the Big Ten, one of the best in college football, in Justin Fields. They have, I think, the most talented, maybe wide receiver core in all of college football. Close, be up there with Bama. They bring back Chris Olave. A guy like Garrett Wilson was a former 5-star. A couple of top 100 guys there from a couple of years ago, Cameron Babb and Jamison Williams. And then they signed several really good ones this last cycle. Julian Fleming, I believe, is the number 3 player in the country. I forget the one guy. It's like Negzea Bigbo. I don't know his name right, but it's 5-star. And then G. Scott Jr. is the top 100 player out in Washington. They just have a very, very talented, young, productive guys like Olave and Garrett Wilson. They have a great tight end in Jeremy Ruckert. They have a very good offensive line. Myers, they got Wyatt Davis, who opted out and opted back in, probably a first-round guy. That offense just doesn't have a lot of holes and you have a great offensive coach and a great offensive mind in Ryan Day. I really have faith in that offense being maybe the best in college football, if not top 3. Now, defensively, I do have a few more questions. They did lose Chase Young. They lost Jeffrey Okudu. They lost Malik Harrison. They lost David Arnett. They lost a lot of really good players. Shaun Wade initially opted out. Now, he did opt back in. But a lot of their production, I don't know if right off the top of my head, but they lost at least half of their starting lineup. They lost a good amount of their top-end production. I mean, they lost 3 first-round guys. I think they lost a total of 5 in the first 3 rounds on the defensive side of the ball. And they have recruited well. Now, when I have looked at the recruiting rankings, the last 2 classes, it significantly has been better on the offensive side of the ball. Remember Ryan Day's an offensive coach. He was the offensive mind out of the coaching tree of Chip Kelly. So, and you've seen, I think this class, he has a pretty good defensive class. But the last 2 were definitely the best players were on the offensive side of the ball. So that being said, I still think that they're going to probably have they have a new defensive coordinator. Jeff Halfway went to Boston College, so they have a new DC. They are putting in a bunch of new players to go to replace the productive NFL players. And I think there's going to be a drop-off defensively. And, for instance, you look at a Penn State in the second game of the season who can run the ball really well, has one of the best tight ends in college football, has an experienced quarterback in Sean Clifford. Could they do some things on the defense? I think they could, and possibly, the offense could be just a little off. They're on the road, it's early in the season. That is the game. If they are to lose, it is that second game of the season at Penn State. When I look at the rest of their schedule, I'm going to pull it up here while I'm talking about them. I don't see them losing to Nebraska. I really do not see they're not going to lose to Rutgers. It's not going to happen. They're not going to lose to Maryland. They're not going to lose to Indiana. They're not going to lose to Illinois. Their schedule is actually ridiculously easy. Michigan State, new coach. I just don't see that happening. The rivalry game, but it's at home. Not that it matters, but by that time, I don't know what exactly they're allowing for fans. But I know Ohio's more likely to be open than other states. Will they be open? We'll see. So if they are open, fans could make a difference. But I think they're better than Michigan. Michigan lost a lot of pieces on their defense, and I think they have question marks on offense. So I really don't see how they lose that game. But I'm telling you, the game that when I just sit here and I'm thinking about it, it is Penn State. It is Penn State. When I was looking at the preseason all Big Ten teams, Ohio State, and when I look at these, Ohio State, once again, kind of aligning with their talent, had the most. And you see Justin Fields as a first-team guy, Trey Sermons, the transfer from Oklahoma, as a first-team guy. And then you got wide receiver, you got Chris Olave, first-team guy, a tight end. You have actually their tight end's not on there, but then you got Thayer Mumford, the tackle. You got Wyatt Davis, the guard. And I'm just going through, and I'm like, offensively, it's really hard to just see anyone being able to match up with them. Then when I look at the defensive side of the ball, and granted, they don't have a lot of these guys they have a lot of very talented guys that probably haven't started yet because they're playing behind Chase Young, Jeffrey Okudu, Malik Harrison, David Arnett. But so now they're getting their chance, but there's not a lot of preseason guys that are going to be that are on the preseason team from the defensive side of the ball. I actually went through, and Pete Warner, the linebacker, was on there. Garrett Haskell, but I don't even know if Haskell's going to pay. He got shot during the offseason. He actually literally got shot. They got Sean Wade, who is going to be one of the best corners, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. But other than that, it's a little bit like there's new guys. There's new guys stepping in. Can they step in? They've recruited well, but like I said, they're not quite as well on the defensive side of the ball. And so their defense there is a question mark. And they're going to, maybe play a Penn State team at Penn State, second game of the season, against an experienced quarterback who has some weapons, who they can run the ball. And they have a defense that has some good players. They have good players if Shaka Toney on the D line, Lamont Wade in the secondary, Jaquan Brisker in the secondary. It's good. There's good players. Brandon Curtis Jacobs was a 5-star by 247 Sports. Brandon Smith, who was a 5-star, could come in at linebacker. Now they don't have Micah Parsons, and obviously Micah Parsons was probably the best linebacker in college football. But they still got good players on every single level. They got experienced players in the secondary. Make a couple plays. They're able to get some points on the defense. That is a game that, as of today, I don't know. I'll see how they look the first games of the season. If Ohio State's just clicking all cylinders and their defense looks amazing, I'll have a hard time picking against them. Maybe they don't. Maybe they look a little bit questionable the first week of the season. And you're like, you know what? they are a little flawed. Maybe Nebraska gets some points on them. You're like, well, Nebraska can, probably Penn State can. And Penn State comes out in their opening game and they look really impressive. And then who knows? I might go into that Penn State game picking Penn State because I think Penn State's a top 10 team. I think they're in the top 10 right now. I think they're 8 or 9, but I think they're legitimately a top 10 team. They're going to always be a preseason top 10 team. So if they can come in and see what they can do against Ohio State. So I've talked a lot about those two. Those are the two teams that I think are the two best teams in the Big Ten. Michigan, has more talent than everyone except for Ohio State and Penn State. We'll see about Joe Milton. He's heard some good stuff in practice reports, but I haven't seen him play yet. So we'll see. They got a young, pretty talented backfield. Lost a really good receiver to opt out, Nico Collins. Obviously, a guy like Devin Peoples-Jones went to the NFL last year. Tarek Black transferred. So the wide receiver core, I don't really know. Ronnie Bell's probably the best guy they have coming back. Defensively, I like Aiden Hutchinson's one of the best interior guys in the Big Ten. So Quiddy Page is one of the better defensive linemen in the Big Ten. They lost Ambry is it Jones? The quarterback who actually opted out. I think that was a pretty significant loss. So Michigan, probably third best team in the Big Ten East because I just don't think Michigan State, first-year head coach. I think I like Mel Tucker, but I think it's going to be a tough year. Maryland still just doesn't have the talent. They're just still not a good team on the level of the rest. And then Rutgers is just horrible. I'm trying to think of the other team in the E over there. Is it Illinois? I got that off the top of my head. But I just think in general, that side, it's going to come down to Ohio State and Penn State with kind of like Michigan as a dark horse. The rest is interesting. I think Wisconsin has to be the favorite. They've won it, except for a couple of years ago in Northwestern. They've really dominated the West for several years. But Jack Cohen is out for the indefinite period. Graham Mertz was a high-rated recruit. They went to Wisconsin, so let's see what he has. Obviously, a new backfield, some new wide receivers that they have to replace, some like Quentin Cephas and like Jonathan Taylor, the running back. But they always have a good O-line, and their O-line is going to be as good as always. They have actually recruited very well, and including this year, they've been actually getting 5-star top 100 offensive linemen. They had possibly the best offensive linemen. They're getting 3 stars. So I think Wisconsin will be fine in the line. They have a good defense as always, good linebacker group. So I still would like Wisconsin in there. Nebraska's a tough schedule. Let's see if Martinez can come back and play at the level that he did 2 years ago. He did not have a very good season last year. I really like Wan'Dale Robinson. I think he was a terrific player coming out of high school, top 100 guy, Adidas All-American. He had a very good freshman year. A couple good JUCO guys that they got for their wide receiver group. We'll see what their offense has. They're defensively, I still think that there's a lot to prove. Once again, Scott Frost has recruited pretty well on that side of the ball. But when it comes to actually bringing back some really productive or bringing back productive guys, Nebraska has not really had a good defense, and I wouldn't say they're bringing back a bunch of production on the defensive side of the ball. So still a lot of question marks over there. You got Iowa. Iowa's always going to be a solid team. You know what they got. They're going to play good offensive line play. They're going to play solid defense. Especially on the line of scrimmage. So they're going to be a tough team. But then the dark horse in the West is really Minnesota. Tanner Morgan is maybe the second best quarterback in the Big Ten to Justin Fields. And Rashad Bateman might be the best wide receiver in all of the Big Ten. So those two guys alone, I think they have a good offensive system. Obviously, their OC headed to Penn State. That's another good thing for Penn State. They picked up a very good OC in the offseason. But I think Minnesota with a good passing game and a good, most importantly, a really good quarterback. They did lose some good players like Antonio Winfield, Kamal Jones, and Johnson Jones, on defense. But Carter Coughlin was another good guy they lost in defense. So they are replacing a lot in defense, and I don't necessarily think they recruit at a level where they can just reload. So defense has some question mark, but I think they'll be able to score. I think they're going to be able to do some good things on offense. And could that get them past Wisconsin, a team that they've lost to 17 out of the last 19 years, I believe, if I'm correct? We'll see. I still would pick Wisconsin. I still trust the Badgers because they've been so pretty much dominant in the West Division for so many years. But you have to look for a dark horse. And if a dark horse, Minnesota would be the one that I picked this year. But if I were to bet today, I think it's an Ohio State, Wisconsin Big Ten title game. Dark horse would be Penn State versus Minnesota. So that's just kind of a rundown of a Big Ten. When you go to just baseline roster talent, I do my formula. I have 4 Big Ten teams in the top 10. Sorry, misspoke. In the top 25, I have Ohio State number 3. I have Penn State at number 10. I have Michigan at number 16, and I have Nebraska at number 22. The team talent composite by 247. I kind of like to compare because it's very similar. The accuracy between my formula and Nebraska was 23. So correct me, 23. It was very similar. The team talent composite was Ohio State 3, Penn State 13, Michigan 16, and Nebraska 24. So very similar. Wisconsin, actually, I think there were 27 in the composite. They were in the next 5 out, and they would have landed about 29 in my formula. That's actually better than they normally have. So they're actually, you might say, well, that's not as talented roster as the other group. Well, they actually never have been. They haven't had a top 25 roster in the team talent composite era since 2015. So they're like right on the edge there. So it's actually a pretty good roster this year by Wisconsin for their standards. But still, Ohio State standard bearer, they're the best team. They're the most talented team. They're the most complete team. And it really is. The dark horse is probably Penn State with a little bit of Michigan mixed in there if a team's going to possibly win it and be really a playoff contender. I would say when you break down the metrics of what makes the playoff contender, Penn State's the only other one that I think with good quarterback play could possibly be a playoff contender. So I'm kind of going over the Big Ten. I've talked about them, what I think about it, what I think about the rosters. And then I guess it's time. I'm actually currently watching former Oregon Ducks. So I'm about ready to talk Pac-12. But I'm currently, as I'm doing this podcast, I have on mute Justin Herbert. He's the starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Chargers. He started the last 3 games, actually, but it was because Tyrod Taylor was hurt. He got actually announced to be the full-time starter here about a couple of days. It was now it's probably close to a week ago, like 5 days ago. And he's won it 20-13. They just got a first down. 2 minutes left in the third quarter, and he's played pretty well. I've been impressed with how he's played. But anyways, the schedule came out. I know I didn't talk about that last time because the schedule had not come out. The schedule came out not this Saturday, but the previous Saturday. And there was not a fumble. Herbert just fumbled. Oh, my goodness. I hate that. He didn't lose the ball, but it's blown down right there. Anyways, back to the schedule. There was not really any surprises. You had your 5 divisional games, 1 crossover, and then they're doing just like the Big Ten. They're playing like every team from the North plays every team from the South, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3. Very similar to the Big Ten. They're just starting 2 weeks later, so they have to play 2 less games. As of now, there's still games getting canceled, games getting postponed. We'll see when it all gets final. I still could end up having the playoff pushback. I don't know. But as of today, there is they're going to play 7 games. Games of it. Well, the very first game of the whole Pac-12 season is on November 7th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So it's a normal time for the East, noon, and it's 11 Central time, but Pacific time it's 9. It is Arizona State at USC, and that is actually probably the favorites in the South. Not probably, the media voted them, and they were the favorites. I would tend to agree. If I'm just a pure baseline talent, unquestionably USC is the favorite. They're considerably more talented than any other roster. And even when you go back, bringing back production, they bring back one of the most productive quarterbacks. He has a very productive wide receiver core, Kedon Slovis, and his wide receiver group of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Vaughns and Drake London. He's probably the best receiving core in the Pac-12. Good stable of running backs, Stephen Carr, Mal Alapei, Marquis Stepp. And he got some good news on the offensive line. That was going to be the question mark because they just haven't played very good on the offensive line in recent years. But he got Elijah Vera Tucker to opt back in. And so I think I really do like their offensively. Defensively, they had a new defensive coordinator. They bring back most of their production, but the problem was the defense was inconsistent. So they have the talent, so that's good. The thing is, they do have the talent. Like sometimes when people bring back a lot of players, like, oh, they bring back 11 starters, all 11 starters. It's like, well, they had a terrible defense. Like they weren't productive at all. Like who cares if they brought back those 11 guys? But if they do have the talent, if they can play up to the level of their talent, then this could be a very, very I don't know if they say very good defense. That'd be a drastic improvement. But even if they're just a solid defense that can do some good things, which I think will be a good offense. I think you have a good quarterback. I think you have some terrific receivers as long as Kedon Slovis doesn't get hurt. But I don't trust USC. I don't trust Clay Helton. Oh, man, I'm watching this game. Herbert's having struggles now. He just fell down throwing a screen pass. Okay, probably shouldn't be watching this game while I'm doing a podcast. Oh, he got tripped, got rid of the ball. Did that guy catch it? No, he dropped it. Okay, anyways, he straight up dropped that ball. Okay. But I don't trust Clay Helton. I don't trust him as a head coach. I just don't think he's a great head coach. I think he's wasted some really talented teams. USC in the team talent composite era has had a top 10 team every single year. Actually, they had top 5 every year, but this is the first year they're number 10. This is their least talented roster on paper, actually, that they have had. So this is the least talented roster that they have had. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean it's at least talented, but they also bring back a lot of production. But I just don't trust him. I don't trust his overall game management. I don't trust his overall roster management. If injuries happen, and they actually do already have injuries, they have, I think, 3 or 4 guys already out for the season. They also have the opt-out of Jay Tufele to the NFL, and they also had 3 other guys just opt out, choosing not to play this year. 2 of them were actually offensive linemen. And then they have 2 guys I know out for the season. I think 2 other guys that are questionable for the season. So if they start having problems and they start having injuries and over his overall management of his roster, I've never thought it's good. Even when he recruits, even when he has signed good classes, they tend to be kind of lopsided. Like you sign like 5 wide receivers and 7 defensive backs, but then he forgets to sign linemen and D linemen, and he just seems to. I'm not going to say a coach that's coaching at the Power 5 level doesn't seem to have a plan, but he just does. I don't think he's a very talented coach, and I think he inherited, the USC, which lives in the most fertile prep prospect grounds, where you have some of the best prep high school football in the nation. and obviously he gets talented roster, and his first team, he had Sam Darnold, who's obviously was a first round pick in the NFL, and he had guys like Adoree Jackson and Juju Smith, and you made the Rose Bowl, won the Rose Bowl. Next year, he won the Pac-12 title, went to the Cotton Bowl. But then when some of that production left, and he had to kind of developed the younger guys. It wasn't developed, and then they had a 5-7 season, and then last year they're 8-5, and they battled through some injuries. And I thought they looked better, but you just never know what you're going to get from USC. But if they play to their talent level, if Keaton Slovis plays like he did last year and even better, and those great receivers, I just think they're better on paper, and I think they could be better than the rest of the conference, especially on the South side. And they definitely could win the South, and they possibly could win all 6 games. But I don't know. I'm not saying I trust them. And I tell you what, the first week playing against Arizona State is a talented quarterback in their own right. Arizona State probably is the second most talented roster in the Pac-12 South. They have a solid head coach in Herm Edwards, and they actually were able to kind of play through when the other like the California schools and stuff shut down because of the restrictions after the season was postponed. Arizona kind of kept on playing because they don't have as many restrictions there. I just see that game as being one of those. Arizona State comes out and they're just a little sharper, and USC just lays a dub right away and loses. I mean, I kind of thought when I saw that game, I was like, yeah, that just screams USC coming out and being flat early in the morning. I know it's at home, but there's probably going to be no fans in the stands, and they got less preparation, you could say, than Arizona State, and they lose. I could totally see it, and who knows, when it comes to picking that game, maybe I'll pick that. But we'll see. As of right now, I still would probably take USC to win it. Arizona State's probably the other team I'm looking at. I don't think they're great at every position and in every unit on their team. They have question marks in the O-line. I don't think they have a great D-line. Inconsistency in the secondary. They have talent, but they're pretty youthful at the skill positions. Arizona State, and they're still, and people are like, oh, well, they've recruited well. It's still the 30 most talented roster according to Team Talent Closet, and even my formula, I think it's somewhere near there. So I don't know. And they start off with two pretty decently tough games, obviously USC and then Cal. The other team's Utah. You always have to respect Kyle Whittingham. They also got to prepare all the way through because they had less restrictions in Utah. So possibly they're a little more prepared. Now, they have a very young team. They have to replace a lot that went to the NFL. But I consider them a dark horse. But I still, at the end of the day, I think USC wins the South. The North, that's obviously where I know the best. That's team I know the best is Oregon. They are the favorite. They're actually the favorite to win the Pac-12. Obviously, the defending champion. You heard me talk about it a lot with Hifliday. They have lost people. They even lost another guy, but they actually gained another guy, and they also gained a transfer. So they had a +2, -1. So it's a +1 advantage from when I last talked about their roster. Overall, they ended up with 4 opt-outs. They lost Penei Sewell, offensive tackle, Outland Trophy winner, probably a top 5 pick. I think for sure is a top 5 pick. And then they lost Jeffin Holland, probably in day 1 or early day 2 pick, their nickelback. And then Thomas Graham, cornerback, and Brady Breeze. Their safety, they did have Domidor Lenore opt back in. He is their all Pac-12 corner, and I thought that was huge. And they also had the transfer in of Jordan Happel. He was a 2-year starter at Boise State. He battled injuries a little, so he didn't play all the way through those 2 years. But when healthy, he was a 2-year starter, and I think he's a guy that can play the nickel. He also played under Andy Avalos, who is the defensive coordinator for Oregon, and that's something that needs to be mentioned because he has a familiarity with his defense. But I think there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off. The offensive line, they not only lose Sewell, but they lose the other 4 offensive line. and they basically have to replace the whole offensive line. So that's the question mark. Quarterback, they have a new quarterback. Obviously, they lost Justin Herbert. I'm watching him play in the NFL. A 4-year starter. It's going to either be Tyler Shuck or Anthony Brown. Brown was a 2-year starter at Boston College that transferred in. Shuck was the backup for Herbert the last 2 years. I think Shuck wins it, and I've seen Shuck play. I saw him play in the spring game in 2019. I saw him play like in 4 or 5 games last year. Mostly garbage time, but he also came in when Herbert got injured against USC. And from what I've seen of Shuck and from individuals that I follow the Oregon beat, he's going to, I think, be a pretty good quarterback. And Joe Moorhead, who obviously was a great offensive coordinator at Penn State, went on to be a Mississippi State head coach that didn't work out. He is now the OC at Oregon. So I think we're a pretty good uprated offensive coordinator. And the fact that this guy has looked good when he has played, and he's experienced, he's a redshirt sophomore, and he's just not some like young kid coming in. I think Show is going to be pretty good. I think he's going to be a solid player. Its offensive line is to be determined. I think there's some guys that have talent. I think that he's recruited pretty well. And actually, as of today, if it allows to predict the offensive line, I would name a bunch of names that none of y'all know. But actually, from a maturity standpoint, it's I think it's one redshirt sophomore, a true junior, and like 2 or 3 redshirt juniors, and I think maybe a redshirt senior would probably be their top like 5, 6 offensive linemen. And they also have a redshirt junior as a tight end, and on the other side, a redshirt senior. So actually, their offensive line, despite not having a ton of game experience, especially from starting experience, has played and is pretty mature. They're not just these true freshmen they're putting in there. It's a guys been in the program 2, 3, 4 years or played at the junior college level. So I like that element. It's better chance that they acclimate, better chance that they're physically there. Like maybe mentally it takes a little bit, but they're physically able to battle out there. At wide receiver actually has been the question mark. With 1, Oregon's recruited very well. 2, almost all the production returned. Their 2 leading pass catchers, Jalen Red and Johnny Johnson III, comes back. Several other guys are either started or played a lot and were productive. Micah Pittman, sophomore. Brian Addison, a sophomore. Josh Delgado, a sophomore. Spencer Webb, who's kind of a flex tight end. He's also played some wide receiver. Sophomore. They also brought in USC transfer Devin Williams. So I actually like their wide receiver group. I think it's pretty talented. I think they have some productive people and experienced people. And then their running back room is kind of the same kind of deal. They bring back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher and all Pac-12 running back C.J. Verdell and Travis Cyrus Bibiliko. Both have played a lot of reps. And they all come back. So I like skill positions. Offensive line, it's going to be a work in progress. We'll see how it goes. And we'll see how the quarterback position goes. And then defensively, they lost all these opt-outs. But despite that, I still think that they have them in Washington, and Washington had lost some guys opt-outs. I would say those are questionably 2 top 10 defenses. Most statistical metrics last year, they were top 10 defenses or top 15 defenses nationally, and they were the top 2 defenses in the Pac-12. To go along with Utah was too, but initially Oregon was bringing back so much, but then 3 guys opted out. So they bring back 5 of their top 10 tacklers. Their 3 leading sack producers, 3 of their 5 leading tackle for loss producers. The guy who was tied to the team lead with interceptions. So even despite the opt-outs, they bring back quite a bit of experience. And they had some transfer in. The JUCO guy in Bennett Williams, he transferred in the safety. He started at Illinois. than Jordan Hapley, who obviously was a 2-year starter at Boise State. So they even brought some experience in there. So I think it's a pretty talented group, a very talented defense, probably the most talented defense in the Pac-12, and even a fairly experienced defense. Despite the opt-outs, I think it's still 7 of 11 starters return, and a lot of even the top producers in every way, tackles, interceptions, tackles for loss, and sacks. So without the opt-outs, this might have been the best defense or top 3 defense in college football. Maybe now it's not that, but I still think it's a very, very good defense. Oregon, I think their toughest matchup is probably going to be, you want to say Washington, the last game, that's December 12th at Oregon, but I don't know. While Washington has the second most talent in the North on paper, they have a lot of question marks on offense. They had only returned 2 starters, both on the offensive line. They have a new quarterback. They have a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, a new scheme, a new quarterback. They have to replace all of their skill talent, wide receiver, running back. I just don't know how good there's only so good you can expect with so much changes to be clicking on cylinders, especially since pretty much no spring ball, a wonky camp. I just think Washington is going to have to really rely on that defense. And the defense, which I thought, like I said, was 1A, 1B, they lost their 2 most productive front 7 guys. Their leading sack guy, Joe Tyron, and their best interior guy in Ozariki. They've recruited well. They have a lot of talent. They have a great secondary. Guys like Elijah Molden and Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon and Keith Taylor, I think, are all terrific defensive backs. They might, I would say, probably have the best, at least in my ratings, I have them being the best defensive backfield. But I think they're a little young in the front 7. Ryan Bowman's a good linebacker, and they have a couple other guys that I can't think of their names right offhand that are productive. But I just don't know if they can get it together the initial season with the new head coach, new OC, new quarterback offensively to be someone that can really challenge for the title. Cal is the one who they like to say is the dark horse to challenge Oregon. I want to say I understand that. They return the quarterback. They return, I think, like 8 or 9 starters on offense. But their offense wasn't any good. and Chase Garber's is a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. The receiving talent's still not very good. Their talent is the bottom half of the conference. They lost their best interior defensive lineman. They lost a couple of their D-backs to the NFL. They did bring back Cam Bynum, who's their best returning defensive back. But I think they have question marks in defense. I don't think they have a very talented offense. I don't know. They could. Who knows? They could challenge. Oregon does have to go there, 5th game of the season. But if I'm still going to say who I think, and it's my team, but it's still the roster's the most talented, even with the opt-outs. They're replacing a lot on offense, but they did hire a very good OC. They don't have a new head coach, so it's not like Washington. Their quarterback is new, but then even if Show didn't win it, Anthony Brown was a 2-year starter at Boston College, so they got an experienced guy. So if Show beats him out, he beat out an experienced quarterback, so that should give you more faith in them. The biggest question mark on offense is the offensive line. And defensively, the secondary does have to replace a guy like Jevon Holland, but I like even what they have back there. Like I said, they still return about 3 starters in defensive backfield. That opt back in of Diamador Lenore basically gives them because they basically had 3 starting corners. Thomas Graham, Diamador Lenore, and Mikael Wright basically split reps last year. Well, Graham opted out, but Lenore and Wright are back, so you basically have your starting corners. And I still like that defensive backfield. I like Avalos as a defensive coordinator. They still have the best pass rusher and Kayvon Thibodeau in the conference. They got, experienced linebacker core, Mesa Funa and Isaac Slade Masatea. They also signed the 2 top inside linebackers of the countries and 5 stars, Justin Flo and Noah Sewell. And then you still got guys like Diamador Lenore and Mikael Wright in the defensive backfield. I still think the defense is very good. I think it's still possibly the best. And I think there's enough on offense that you like from a skill position standpoint, as long as you can get solid play from the quarterback, that they can possibly I can see Oregon being the team that wins it all. And who knows, go 7-0. We'll see. If I had to make a prediction today, I think it's Oregon. I've said this in the last episode, versus USC. And I would trust Mario Cristobal to beat Clay Helton. I think that kind of covers it. I went through the schedule, the games I liked. And like I said, if I had to pick the top 3 games, ASU versus USC week 1, week 6, the Washington-Oregon game, probably the week 5 game between Oregon and Cal would be up there too. I'm just excited, man. I'm excited for the season, excited to see the Big Ten, Pac-12 kick it off. Big Ten, once again, 12 days. 12, it's about 26, so they're starting 2 weeks after that. And can they make the playoff? I think, an undefeated Ohio State's making the playoff. So let's just put that out there. One loss Ohio State, if they win the Big Ten title, probably will. Now, if they one loss don't win the title, maybe not. Penn State, one last champion, I could see them doing it. I think a one last Big Ten, I could see it. I think the Big Ten, Pac-12 is going to have to win all their games, not only because they just play less than everyone else. I just think they have less respect. People don't trust them as much. And I think, for instance, Oregon, I'm just picking Oregon, they would have to be 7-0, and I don't think it would have to be where they're winning games like, they won a last-second touchdown over Stanford. They beat Washington by 14, or 14 would probably be fine. But like to beat Washington, they were down and came back and had to win in overtime. And games are really tight and they're just barely winning. And then they're having to compete against maybe a one-loss SEC team or maybe 2 ACC teams only have one loss, like Clemson and Notre Dame. And then you might see Pac-12 still getting boxed out even with a 7-0 team. So I think they have to be 7-0, and I think they have to be fairly impressive. I don't have much to say. I'm just looking forward to the season. Next week, I'm probably going to try to get a guest on to either talk Pac-12 or Big Ten, kind of like a Big Ten guest, because it will be literally about 5 days before the Big 12, the Big Ten kickoff, and there's some excitement building in Big Ten country. I actually live in Big Ten country, so guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. Definitely subscribe to the Sportscast on iTunes. Check it out. I'll be doing some predictions coming up on the sportscast.net. Have a wonderful night, guys, and I will talk to you later.